Unmuted. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our series. Today, we're very excited to be speaking to Dr. Sandra Weitz. But before I bring her on, I, of course, will create the usual introductions. I will introduce myself and SoMeDocs and let you all know that you are all an important part of SoMeDocs. And so this show was created in order to be interactive. So everybody is welcome to interact as I speak, as the guest speaks, as the guest lectures, and to both ask questions and take part in the different kinds of challenges that we throw out there. So before we begin, if anybody wants to be a part of this, we have a comment challenge that is the following. Are you doing anything different to your workplace that makes it better to work in? And if anybody has an answer to that, please, let us know. You don't have to be a physician to answer. We all learn from one another. And before I introduced our guest, basically, I want to just introduce SoMeDocs to those of you that are new to the concepts. SoMeDocs stands for Doctors on Social Media. We're here to provide communities that network, that learn, and that grow. SoMeDocs has a new marketing arm that helps physicians be seen and have their brands be seen in unique ways. And there's a new membership option, which is a great way to get added perks to the free membership. So there's a premium membership for those of you that are looking to up level on SoMeDocs and get even more. So the next thing I want to just let you guys all know is that if you're not a physician and you're watching this, that's okay. We love you too. In fact, SoMeDocs is built to empower physicians so that we can empower patients, because we want to give physicians powerful voices out on social media and in the online world, so that we bring the experts one step closer to the patient, right? Take out some of those unnecessary middlemen and just have a pure patient-physician connection. All right. We have a new YouTube channel. So for those of you that want to watch this live and want to just follow it on YouTube, these shows are transmitted live into our YouTube channel. This footage can also be accessed through our website, which is getting revamped and getting redone and is going to be fabulous. So check it out at somedocs.com. All right. And this is actually the link to the live that we're doing right now on in YouTube. This is also going live in our Facebook groups, but we are going to slowly phase out of being live on every one of these platforms and just be live in one space. All right. So again, the challenge for today is, are you doing anything different to your workplace that makes it better to work in? And if you're tuning in after this is live, we won't be able to share what you say with everybody that's listening, but we will be able to have a comment section where everybody's answers are pieced together. So if you're watching this later, just write down your comment on how you're making your workplace different in order to inspire us all. All right, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest lecturer and speaker for today, Dr. Sandra Weitz. She is basically, I'm going to let you know who she is, but she's a fellowship trained board certified pain management specialist, and she started her own practice and grew it to 11 providers. Now, her bio is actually longer than that. It's just that we can't fit it into this space right here. So if you want to know more about Sandra Weitz and see her full bio and also get links to her work, we'll have that up on our website whenever you want to check it out, somedocs.com. So without further ado, introducing Dr. Sandra Weitz.
Hi.
And Hi, Sandy. I'm actually going to remove myself and let you get straight into the lecture, and you're going to see me in about 30 minutes, and we're going to have Q&As. So thank you so
Perfect.
much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dana. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. First of all, I started in academics. I did an anesthesia residency, a pain fellowship, and then stayed on in that role as the director of the pain service for 5 years. And during those 5 years, ended up taking a pay cut every year rather, it seemed like every day, and lived in California where the cost of living was just out of control. And so my husband and I decided, okay, there has to be a better way. We are not going to be poor for the rest of our lives for the privilege of working in academics. So what happened? Well, I picked up and moved to Louisiana, believe it or not, from California, right? And that was in and of itself an interesting experience. Joined a group who said, oh yes, we need a pain specialist. The only problem was that they thought that I was going to do blocks in the back of a recovery room and didn't actually understand what treating chronic pain meant. Worked for them for about 1.5 years and said, okay, this really just doesn't work for me. My model, and I expressed the model to them, is this comprehensive approach. And I'm telling you, we can make a lot of money doing this. And they went, yeah, no. And went, okay, if you don't want to do that, then I'm leaving. Left, started my own practice. So as you heard from Dana, started my own practice, grew the practice to 11 providers over the course of time. But in addition to that, we brought in, I built a 25,000 square foot medical office building to house my clinic. In that building, also built a multi-specialty ambulatory surgery center. And then over time, brought in a bunch of related entities. So imaging, physical therapy, weight loss, psychological services, massage, chiropractic care, a float center. Basically, all ways in which to provide much better patient care, much more comprehensive service, but also to leverage that medical practice, okay? And so that's a little bit about who I am, okay? Why is this important? Well, one of the things that makes me just cringe is the number of physicians who want to leave medicine because they don't see the opportunities, okay? We have all spent a tremendous amount of time and energy and money, all right, on our medical educations. We have unique expertise that other people just don't have, right? But we all are looking for, not we all, but many people are looking for ways to escape medicine, to get some side gig, something else outside of medicine where you have to learn a whole new skill set, right? And I know you're thinking to yourself, they don't teach us the business of medicine in medical school or in residency. So I have to learn that somehow. Well, let me argue with you that in actuality, you don't learn everything you know about medicine in medical school, right? You don't learn everything that you know about treating patients in residency. It's an ongoing learning process. And learning the business of medicine is really just another facet of that. And, when I think back on my own career, I'll tell you how old I am. There was no such thing as robotic surgery. Now, all of a sudden, everybody wants to do robotics. If you don't evolve in your practice, how do you actually get any place? Okay. So I want to talk to you today about how do you figure out how to leverage yourself? Okay. And there are a number of really key steps in terms of trying to figure this out. And what's the reward? Well, if you can vertically and horizontally integrate these businesses into your core medical practice, you're going to offer better patient care. You're going to increase the referrals to your base practice because the services cross over, right? And I can explain that to you in a minute. You make much more money without actually having to do more work yourself, because at the end of the day, there's a limit to how many hours there are and how many patients you can physically see. So you need to find some way to get more money per patient. And that's by offering these collateral services. And then you can share the wealth with other physicians by syndicating, okay? Meaning selling them shares in these businesses. Well, it does two things for you. Number one, they bring more cases or they bring more utilization of those services. And they want to refer to you because you now have a relationship with them, okay? So I know that it can be really scary when you're thinking about, how do I do this? Well, so here we go. First of all, you need to really understand the business model, okay? What service do you want to offer? And what is the need for that service, right? And do you have a specific niche? So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you are interested in bringing in massage. There's a massage parlor on every single corner, right? There's Massage Envy, there's Elements, there are individual massage therapists. But if you have a niche where you are incorporating it into your practice because, let's say, as a pain specialist, you want to help the patient with a non-medication modality that can relieve their muscle spasms, massage can be a great addition. Okay, so you need to figure out, how am I going to position myself that makes me different? Let's say you want to start an ambulatory surgery center, right? Well, for example, you may live in a state that has something called a certificate of need, okay? A certificate of need means you have to prove to them that there's some reason that you need to open this ambulatory surgery center. Other states don't have a certificate of need, okay? But you want to really evaluate, how much business am I going to be able to bring to this service? Do I need other people to bring business to this service? Okay, or am I doing enough on my own? For example, I went through the process of figuring out, how many cases do I need to bring to my own ambulatory surgery center? And if I bring that number of cases, is that enough for me to make a profit? And or do I need to try and recruit other physicians? And by making those determinations, you will ultimately be able to figure out how viable an option this particular business is that you are thinking about bringing in. So do I have a niche? How much need is there in the community? I mean, if you offer something that somebody's going to use once in a blue moon, and you live in a very small place and nobody is going to travel to you, then that's probably not a great idea. On the other hand, if you offer something that's unique, then people indeed will travel to see you, okay? Or if you live in a place that has a high population density. You need to understand who's the competition, right? If you are offering something that other people don't offer, then your chance of capturing that market goes up. This comes back to that whole niche idea, right? I'll give you an example. My husband is a urologist. He decided that doing vasectomies in the office was a losing proposition. Losing from two perspectives. Number one, guys who show up for vasectomies tend to be really nervous. And a number of them had vasovagal episodes where they passed out at the thought that somebody's going to do a vasectomy on them. So he decided that he was going to do vasectomies in an ambulatory surgery center with conscious sedation. All right. Let me tell you that he captured the market, because basically guys were like, wait a minute, I don't have to know that this is happening. I'm more than willing to sign up to have this done under anesthesia. Okay. So you need to think about, who's my competition? What are they doing? Is there something that I can offer that's different? Maybe you can't offer something that's different. All right. Ultimately, if it's not something that's different, then is there one other guy doing this or one other girl doing this? Or is it there are hundreds of people doing it, right? It's like anything else. Next, you really need to understand the expenses and the revenue that can be generated, right? Because there are a lot of ideas that are great. And then you think to yourself, oh my God, there's so much risk. Well, some ideas have more risk than others. And there are very clear ways to mitigate those risks. So, for example, let's talk about revenue. If you are currently employed, right, or you're currently owning your own practice, you can run a report and understand your payer mix. If you're taking insurance, where's that money coming from? Are you seeing mostly Medicare? Are you seeing mostly commercial? What do you see? And what is the average reimbursement? Okay. Now, you'll say to me, well, okay, I want to add a new service. Yeah, but if you understand the current contracts, right? What's my payer mix? Is most of it Medicare? Is it mostly commercial? Is it mostly HMO? Is it mostly PPO? Then you can then back into at least an estimate to start of what you think the payer mix will be for your new service if you're going to take insurance. So let's say you're going to open this ambulatory surgery center, right? If my practice, if the cases that I'm doing, and I can run that report out of my software, says that I'm doing 20% Medicare and 60% commercial, then you can pretty much guess that that's the same payer mix that I'm going to have in my ambulatory surgery center. Similarly, if I want to open an imaging center, if I know what my numbers are in that community in terms of the payer mix, I will have a pretty good idea of what that new service is going to generate. Okay, it becomes a little bit harder when you're looking at things that are purely cash services, like a float center, for example. But for other things that are covered by insurance, you can basically extrapolate what you think that payer mix is going to be. You can then look up every CPT code using the CMS website. Okay. And so if you can run the report and know what the payer mix is and know what your contracts are relative to Medicare, then you can pretty much, if you then look up new CPT codes, be able to create financial projections for what you think that new business is going to be bringing in. Okay. Then you need to really try and guess what that ramp up is going to look like. What do I mean by ramp up? Ramp up means the day you come up with this beautiful idea, all right, the patients don't necessarily, or the clients don't necessarily show up immediately. So how long is it going to take you to get busy? All right. And this is true whether you're starting a practice, whether you're adding a new service. This same thought process goes in at it for each of these entities. Okay. It also goes into whatever other business you want to run, even if it's outside of medicine, because ultimately you need to figure out what that startup time is going to look like. And you need to project what that revenue is going to look like. So for example, if I have 10 patients in month 1, and then I have 30 patients in month 2, and I expect to get X amount per patient, what does that look like, right? Because you're going to need to build out what the revenue looks like. Then you need to really understand what your expenses are, okay? And the reason that that's very important is there are some things where they're very expensive to get started. And there are some things that really are not very expensive to get started. And so the amount of risk that you're taking up front is pretty minimal. For example, if you hired, let's say, a massage therapist as an independent contractor, or a chiropractor as an independent contractor, or a psychologist to add to your services as an independent contractor, you're not really on the hook for much of anything, right? So you can project what your revenue is, and you have relatively low risk in terms of expenses. On the other hand, let's say you want to start a physical therapy clinic, right? Or you want to start something like, an imaging center. You need to really understand, okay, how, for example, with an imaging center, how many MRIs do I need per day in order to break even? Okay. And because then I'll come back to what I said to you before. We need to figure out where we're going to get those people from. Are they coming directly from you? And obviously, the more you can fuel the business to start with, the better it is, because then you know the only person you're relying on in terms of getting you whole is you. And then you have time to work on, how do I bring other people? Obviously, if you are able to add additional providers into your own practice, they also, I'll come back to, fuel that business, right? So it really is, and when I talked about earlier, horizontal and vertical integration, horizontal meaning you need to expand your existing practice with more providers so that they, in turn, utilize more of the list of services that you're going to offer. I would tell you that if you're listening to me and you're thinking, this is very overwhelming, how do I even start to figure out which thing do I add first? I would tell you, start with the low-hanging fruit. Start with the thing that has the least amount of risk, all right, for the amount that you're going to get in return. Now, that may not be your home run in terms of huge income, but it will give you a way to start and figure out the process, because the process that I've described to you of understanding your numbers, understanding the revenue, understanding the expenses, figuring out your niche, figuring out the competition, right? This is the same regardless of what business you are going to run. And so you have to be able to break this down into bite-sized pieces. And so if you start with the low-hanging fruit, that's the thing that's most likely to get your feet wet, if you will, and give you a sense of, hey, yes, I can do this, and then take on the next venture. It's also important because it will give you extra cash that you can then reinvest back into your business. Okay. But I want to say a couple of other things about this process. Number one, understand that you need to figure out whether you're going to take insurance for some of these services. You're not going to take insurance because if you have a different business, let's say you start that physical therapy business, I would strongly encourage you that it is a totally separate business with a totally separate business structure, and it's going to have its own contracts. Okay. And the reason that that's important is that it can take quite a bit of time to get those contracts. Okay. Or you could decide that you're going to offer the service at a network, or you can decide that you are going to take cash only, but you have to go through that decision-making process and build that in when you're thinking about how much time is it going to take to get this thing up and running. So some things take no time, right? If you have extra space in your clinic, then bringing in the massage therapist or the chiropractor doesn't take a lot of time to get you up and running if you're going to take cash only, right? Obviously, if you're going to build something, let's say, an imaging center or PT or an ambulatory surgery center, there's much more startup time. So kind of build that into your thought process. The other thing that I will tell you is that really look at, how do I do this inexpensively? I talked to somebody recently who was like, oh, I'm interested in an imaging center. It's going to cost me $3 million. Well, first of all, it's not going to cost you $3 million, right? The banks are more than willing to lend to physicians who are doing these projects, assuming you have the financial projections that I talked about. I mean, you really need to have a business plan. Where is the money going to come from, right? What revenue am I going to generate? What are my expenses going to be? What are my startup costs, and how long do I think it's going to take me, right? But if you have those things, the banks are usually very willing to give you a favorable loan. So you don't have to come out of pocket for this entire amount, okay? You don't have to buy all of the equipment. Let me tell you that you can lease the equipment, right? And I'm not a tax attorney or a CPA, but I will tell you from my own experience, there are significant advantages to leasing equipment because, among other things, you don't have to come out of pocket for the entire amount on day one. Okay. And a lot of the companies that lease the equipment, so like Siemens, if you're looking at a C-arm, will give you all sorts of deals. Okay. Similarly, a number of the companies will give you the device itself, assuming you're going to buy the disposables. So you have to really make a list of all of the equipment I need and then really go talk to these vendors for whatever service you're looking at adding to figure out what is the least expensive way to get my doors open, all right? I know that we all think, oh, I want to have the most beautiful thing to start on day one, and I have to have perfect furniture, and I have to have perfect this and this. No, start small. Okay, I will tell you, when I went into private practice, all of my furniture for the first 3 years either came from Costco or Office Depot, right? Unless you are in Beverly Hills on Rodeo Drive and you are, only catering to the wealthiest of wealthy, all right, I don't know that anybody really cares whether you have the fanciest of furniture. And I will tell you firsthand, people pee on the furniture, people vomit on the furniture. And so at the end of the day, having the world's fanciest furniture, probably not in your best interest. You can also mitigate your costs if you're looking at a big project by bringing in people ahead of time. Talk to the people in your community and figure out whether or not there are other docs who are willing to invest. Now, obviously, you're going to have to give up more of the pie if you bring somebody in before there's a revenue stream, okay? And that's a whole other conversation to have, but that's one way that you can decrease your upfront costs. You can also bring in a strategic partner. Okay, so depending on which project you're looking at, if you're looking at something like an imaging center or PT, if you're looking at something like an ambulatory surgery center, again, you can bring in a strategic partner who's willing to put up cash to get the thing off the ground, but you're going to give up a whole lot of your upside potential in doing that. So I know that I've given you a whole bunch of ideas and it can seem very overwhelming. Let me tell you that my husband's favorite joke in the entire world is, how do you eat an elephant? And the answer is one bite at a time. Don't listen to this talk and think to yourself, oh my God, I don't even know where to get started. The first place to get started, okay, is basically to decide, is there really a need? And then go back and look at your own numbers, right? I cannot stress enough to you that whether you are an employed physician or whether you are a practice owner, okay, knowing your own numbers, knowing your payer mix, knowing how well you're collecting money, knowing how many days you have in AR. These are the keys to the success, not only of your practice, not only of the ability to bring in other providers, but the ability to add any other business, okay? Because those numbers really tell you what the opportunity is. So those are my words of wisdom for you, and hopefully this was helpful.
Great. That was fabulous. I'm actually writing down questions. There's questions coming in. And so thank you so much, Sandy, for giving us this quick talk. Let me just take a look. So for those of you that are just tuning in, Dr. Sandra Weitz just spoke to us about leveraging our degree to do something differently, but not necessarily having to learn so many new things. So let's go to the, you're getting some claps from the comment section. So here, I'll just show, like, for example, Dr. Lewis Chug. Okay. All right, let's start with his question, actually. What do I need to start a new outpatient practice? where I already have referrals from doctors and patients? I guess he's asking.
And I assume you don't have a non-compete?
If Louis Chug, if you're still watching, let us know if you have a non-compete. And for those of you watching who don't know what that means, it's something that our employers make physicians often make a sign, which ensures that we do not competitively start a practice once we leave them within either a certain amount of time or a certain distance away from where we worked for them. So
Okay.
yes, he does not have a compete, it sounds like.
Okay, so let me answer this in two ways. Let's start from, even if you have a non-compete, number one, many of the non-competes are non-enforceable. So you're always going to want to check with a lawyer about your non-compete. And I will tell you that as the employer, right, that every time we hired a new provider, okay, that we readdressed the non-compete, because the non-compete is based on the case law in your state. And the case law changes every time somebody brings a new non-compete case. And so when I wrote the first contract many years ago, that non-compete, those non-compete terms, if I had not changed them, would have invalidated the non-compete. Okay. So even if you have a non-compete, you need to check. Number two, most non-competes that are upholdable are relatively narrow in scope, meaning the distance is pretty small. So unless you live someplace really far, far away, or rural, I should say, you should be able to still utilize your referral base, both physician and patients, even because you only have to be 1 block outside that non-compete. Okay, so let's say your non-compete is 10 miles. If you're 10 miles in 1 block, the non-compete is not upholdable. So you should still be able to access your referrals, your referral base of both patients and physicians. So now to come back to Dr. Chug's question, the place that if you already have those referrals, then you should have a very good sense of what your payer mix is, because if you know who those patients are and who's referring to you, you should be able to understand your payer mix. You should be able to then go out and get credentialed and contracted with the insurance companies. That's really going to be your very first step, in part because getting a contract can really take 6 months. Okay. So I actually did a Facebook Live on this on my own Facebook page. But just to go back and tell everybody who hasn't had a chance to see that, credentialing is basically the good housekeeping seal of approval. Okay, all it does is say that the insurance company recognizes you as an approved physician. It has absolutely zero to do with money. Okay, contracting is where they tell you what they're going to pay you. So you can either be in network or out of network. If you're in network, then you're agreeing to the fee schedule that that insurance company says they're going to give you. If you're out of network, they're still going to pay you according to their fee schedule, but essentially you can balance bill, okay? Or you can just decide you want to take cash. If you are interested in being in network or out of network, you have to be credentialed. If you're not credentialed, then it's a cash-only business. But even if you're credentialed, if you want to be in network, you need a contract. The reason that I am spelling this out is because you can get credentialed and contracted simultaneously. But both of those processes take 3 to 6 months. All right. So from the time you think, hey, I want to do this, even before you start to look for space, even before you start to think about, how do I get my doors open, you need to get those contracts, right? And the other thing that I want to point out, because somebody's going to ask this question, even if you are credentialed by, let's say, Blue Cross of New York, okay, in your current employer, that credentialing may or may not cross over to your new business, number one. Number two, the contract. So let's say that you're currently employed and you see Blue Cross patients. When you open your doors, that contract belonged to your previous employer, has nothing to do with you. Okay, so for all of you who are out there going, well, but I'm already credentialed and I already have a contract. No, you don't.
That's important.
It's very important. So that's really the first step in terms of figuring out, how do I start my own practice? Things like, how do I find space? How much space do I need? Those come after.
Right.
And I could be here for another 5 hours talking about that. But really, this is the first step.
Okay, fabulous. And to answer your question, Lewis is asking, we will share the links to where she could be found afterwards, because this is the point, is to sort of bring speakers that are willing to pay it forward, and then you can connect with them afterwards. So happily we'll flash it after we're done. So stay tuned. And it will also be on the website. So if you want to connect and see that video that she was mentioning, just connect afterwards and we'll be happy to share that. So if you have any more questions, write them in the comment section. There is someone who wrote the following. What is your opinion of the value of a business plan preceded by strategic planning? Since most physicians have no training in business, how do you propose a newbie to business gets started working out an idea?
Well, so, you don't have to be a business expert to write a business plan, right? It really starts with the, why do I want to do this? Oh, well, I shouldn't say that. The first question is, what do I want to do? Okay. The second question is, why do I want to do it? Because I'm enthusiastic about treating X, Y, and Z. And because I think there's an opportunity because there's nobody else here in town that's doing it, or because I have a specific niche. But you have to speak to the what I want to do, why do I want to do it, right? Then how am I going to do it? I'm going, I'll give you an example. When we decided to build our building, I'm going to find a lot. I'm going to find an architect, right? What are the steps, right? It's like I'll come back to what I said about, how do you eat an elephant? It's one step, one bite at a time. It's the same process, right? How am I going to do this? What do I need to do this? Okay. Let's say I'm going to open a PT clinic, I need the space, I need the physical therapist, I need the equipment. And if you have this idea, let's say, it's something that you've seen, or it's an idea that you have, think through the step-by-step process of how do you go about it. If you're, like, for example, you want to open an ambulatory surgery center, or you want to open a physical therapy gym, right? Go to a physical therapy gym and walk around and take an inventory. They have this number of beds, they have this number of physical therapists, and do the research to figure out initially you only need one PT, right? You don't need, when you write this business plan, you may say at 3 years, you're going to be busy enough to have X number, but on day one, you only have to have one. So what do I want to do? Why do I want to do it? How do I do it? And then you have to come up with the revenue projections, right? How many people do I think are going to utilize this service, right? Again, where are the patients or where are the clients going to come from? Are they coming from, the community? Are they coming from your practice? Do you think that, are you offering a service that other physicians may want to refer their patients to? So you have to come up with some projection as to the number, and that number is, something on day one. And then, the number is a different thing at the end of month 2 and yet another thing at the end of month 5, right? But that's true of any business, okay? Let's say that you decide that I'll give you real estate that all these physicians seem to be hot and heavy about, right? How do you figure out whether you should buy a property? Well, is it rentable? How much is the rent? What's the return on the rent? These are the same questions that you're going to need for this business plan to start whatever new business you have, all right? And so how many clients am I going to have? How much revenue is that going to generate? And then what are the expenses associated with it? Nobody expects one myth I want to address is that I think people have this anxiety that they're supposed to be profitable on day 1, right? When you write a business plan and you go to a bank and you're asking for money based on your business plan, they understand that you're asking for money because you haven't made that money yet, right? Yes, you ultimately have to show that you can be profitable and be able to cover the note. But the expectation is not that you're going to be up and running at 100% on day 1. They just want to see that you have thought through the process of where's the revenue going to come from, and how long is it going to take you to get to a point that you're actually profitable.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I found a few quotes that were interesting. Ali Webb, she's an entrepreneur. She says, just start. Don't worry that you don't have all the answers, which is interesting because it's actually not what you said at first, but it applies to what you're saying now, meaning and wisely so, suggesting that we actually put thought and think through how we start. And yet you're also emphasizing, and correct me if I'm wrong, Sandy, but you're emphasizing that you can make mistakes along the way. You need to just go for it, but have things planned out. Would that be correct in saying?
What I'm saying is there are ways to mitigate the risk,
Right.
okay? And the ways in which, so yes, you have to go for it, but you can't go for it with reckless abandon.
Right.
Right. I will tell you that, one of the physicians I know very well told me recently, oh, I just throw spaghetti against the wall and to see what sticks.
Right.
Oh, and I just sat there and went,
right.
Oh my God. No.
In what?
And so, no, in terms of new business ideas.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And so you cannot just throw, all the people who are struggling out there going, oh, private practice is so hard, or, more of these, businesses are so hard.
Right.
They're not hard if you did the due diligence on the front end
right.
to mitigate the risk and really understand, what the limitations are. Now, to come back to, I'm sure you're saying, it seems like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. No, because at the end of the day, it's a projection, right? The whole idea, I kept using the word, if you guys are paying attention, financial projections.
Right.
It does not mean that, I'm going to sound like a TV commercial. Past performances are not an indicator of future, right?
Legal disclaimer.
Legal disclaimer. I mean, the bottom line is that you're saying this is what I think is going to happen. You know what? I have thought a number of things are going to happen. I've written a business plan only for CMS to come back and bundle some service. So my revenue projection was not what it was because they changed the rules on me.
Right.
But the thing that I cannot emphasize enough is you have to be nimble.
Yes.
All right. You have to be able to change with changing data. All right. And this idea that it is somehow static. Medicine is not static. Treating patients is not static. The business of medicine is not static. Right. You have to evolve as it goes.
It's very similar to being on social media and developing presence, first of all, I look at it entrepreneurially. You almost need a business plan sometimes. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because I know that, right? You're good at that and I'm good at this. And yet there's so much that resonates. So again, that's why I asked you for the context, because sometimes people just go ahead and just go ahead and start social media platforms and just go for it. But I think the risk there is very low compared to like quitting your job and starting a whole business and starting a private practice.
Yes, but I would tell you that even the social media thing, and you said it at the beginning, we're not going to be live on 5 different platforms because it takes too much energy to try and be, I'll tell you from my own playing around with this. It takes too much energy to be on Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook, right? Ultimately, you have to focus on where am I going to have the most success, right? And that's why I'm telling you that I spent the past 30 minutes talking about leveraging yourself in medicine, but this is really a talk about how do you start and run any business.
Right. Well, unless, and I have to interject because I want to teach something social media related here, is that unless there is a tool that can simplify that process. And what I mean to say is I'm using a tool that allows me to be live in all of those spaces. Again, not on Instagram, but in Facebook, I can be in 5 different groups, and on YouTube, I could be in 2 groups. So if I could do that together, I will. And I put thought into it too. So Sandy's great because I strategized as well. The reason I'm doing it now is because these are new series for me. So I need the more traction that I could get, the better, the more eyeballs. But later, when I actually will care about the numbers, right? Is this a popular show? I want to go to 1 or 2 spaces and gather those rather than having to go to like 5 different places. Does that resonate, Sandy?
Absolutely. Well, and you and I are saying the same thing. You have thought through where are my clients going to come from? All right. And in your case, it's viewers, right? But they're still clients.
Yes, of course. Well, you have to think about it that way.
Exactly. You have to think about it that way.
Right. It's funny because in the Facebook group, someone did ask a few weeks ago, do you call, they said, your patients clients? And everyone, of course, said no, because patients are patients. It's a different relationship, but it's similar to a client relationship.
I would tell you that patients are patients, but patients are also clients.
Right.
All right. And
in regard to clients.
Well, you have a relationship with them, a client. I mean, and they may be a client in terms of the psych service that you offer. They may be a client in terms of they come to your, massage therapist or to your float center, but you see them as a patient. All right. We could just call them people. I think, and yes, they're patients, and I get that 10,000%, but I also think there's a problem with that. Because I think when you say, oh, they're patients and we're doctors, it somehow implies that the thought process behind this is different than some other business. Right. Doctors are entitled, all right, to actually run their practices like a business.
Right.
Right. Why should we be apologetic for that?
Well, and it actually empowers the patient because it implies that they've got choices.
They do. Right. They do. And I think that one of the things that gets lost in medicine sometimes is that really and truly medicine is a service provider. Right. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people who are going to give me a thumbs down, but you are really no different than a restaurant server. Right. All right. Or the nail salon person. Right. All right. People have, unless you're the only doctor in town, people have the choice of going somewhere else. Right. And it really is about customer service. And I will tell you that you can, if you do the right thing, if you really take great care of patients, all right, you offer them more services, they'll like you better. You will get more referrals and you will make a lot more money, just like any other service industry.
Absolutely. No, that's great. And there's a lot coming from SoMeDocs in that realm. We've got a reputation management speaker coming for our lecture series on Tuesday nights, and we've got a hospitality expert where our reviews are concerned, because more and more as the online world grows, we are relying on what people think of us.
Absolutely.
It makes sense because we're the equivalent of a business. We are a business, each of us. But do you find that there's something also scary about that in any way?
I think the thing that's scary is that it really requires a change in mindset on the part of physicians. I think that in medical school and residency, there is such a focus on being that doctor.
Right.
And for many years, not really being that empathy, not necessarily having as much emphasis on being that empathetic human doctor,
Right.
but really being more of, being rewarded for being that great technician or that great diagnostician instead of that great human being.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's definitely a change in mindset that needs to happen.
So do you suggest, I'm thinking as you speak, do you suggest that we add a component to our medical school training that is both centered around empathy and then centered around business? Do you think that that would be really great for medical physicians coming out?
Absolutely.
Interesting. Okay. Empathy and business.
Well, and I think, one of the things that really gets lost in medical education, and again, this is probably not a popular thought process, is choosing a specialty. Okay. I mean, there are opportunities in every single specialty, some more than others. Mm-hmm. Right? And you have to have this balancing act of how passionate am I about X, Y, and Z versus how much money am I going to make and how much do I owe? And then what is my life going to look like? And, I'm old enough to remember that there was a commercial for the Army where they said, "Oh, it's not a job, it's an adventure." And my husband, who, as you've probably gathered, is pretty witty, looked at me and went, "Okay, this stopped being an adventure a long time ago." And I think the thing is that we all go into medicine, or I would like to think that we all go into medicine because we're passionate about it. We want to do this. We love it. But like anything, it becomes a job after some number of years. Okay. And so if you don't understand the business, of medicine, if you don't understand how to get the most out of it, okay, within the parameters that you want, then indeed you get frustrated or you get, burnt out, as people are saying. But at the end of the day, there are ways that we can help mitigate that, minimize that, just by having this conversation at the medical school level when somebody's choosing a residency. I mean, I'll tell you, I started as a surgery resident, and it again, I'm old. It was every other night on call. Okay. And one night I was up all night with this 50-year-old surgeon. The next night, my partner, the other intern, was up all night with the same 50-year-old surgeon. The third night, I was up all night with the same 50-year-old surgeon. And at some point, I thought to myself, oh, I have zero desire to be 50 years old and up all night for the third night in a row. You need to think through the choices. I don't think there's enough of that conversation.
Interesting.
At the medical school level.
Interesting. Yeah, that resonates. I mean, I chose primary care because I wanted to keep my diagnoses different. Like, I didn't want to just focus on one body part because I wanted that excitement and the thrill of walking into a room and just not knowing what's going to be there. And yet that's a different story. But not knowing that primary care would be what it is today, which in my opinion is very much broken for many reasons. And I'm not going to go into it, but it's interesting that medical students don't really quite fully understand the implications. That being said, they do get to rotate and experience, but maybe we should focus on teaching the business aspects of it as well.
The other problem with it, Dana, though, is that you rotate through an academic center.
Right. Oh, interesting.
Right? And, I this is not to disparage academics. I loved being in an academic practice, but that is not the real world for a lot of people.
Right.
And from the business of medicine perspective, a lot of times the people in academics have no awareness about how much something is actually being charged, how much their department actually collects for the work that's being done.
Right.
And I'll give you a very quick example of that. I would hire somebody straight out of fellowship, and they would show up and say, I want to do X, Y, and Z. And I'd look at them and I'd say, we don't do that here, because it's going to cost us X number of dollars to do that. And they would say, oh, but I did this at such and such place. And I'm like, because nobody cared whether they were losing money on this.
Right. The overhead is not a consideration when you're working for a large organization. And so that's why talks like this are important. And that's why new physician brands that are online are important, because we're actually starting to connect. And so those of us who are in private practice and who have the knowledge that can be passed on, I think that's why this is so very important. Again, academics are amazing. I think that lifestyle also does work for some people. Some people don't mind sort of having that safety net and working for larger organizations and not have to worry about that headache that you're, to me, describing things that could be overwhelming about finding this 25,000 square foot space and then finding the disciplines that work. And do you take insurance? Do you not take it? And could that be a headache for some people and maybe not worth it for some?
Absolutely.
And can I get specific with you, actually? Do you think that the fact that, for example, you were in pain management, which gives different reimbursements, it would be a separate consideration than someone, for example, in primary care, where the reimbursements are much lower?
I think the model is exactly the same. No, I don't think it's different. I think, in terms of expectation, like I'll give you an example. If you're in primary care, you're not going to open your own ambulatory surgery center, okay? Because you don't do any cases.
Right.
But you may decide that you know enough surgeons in town that you're willing to buy the building,
of course,
and then and so I'll give you an example. Let's say that you want to have an ambulatory surgery center. You're a primary care guy, okay? You can buy the real estate, okay? Syndicate the shares. So sell shares in your real estate business, all right, to the other primary care doctors in town who have no way to leverage themselves in an ambulatory surgery center, all right? But they could participate in that real estate venture. Right. And then have the docs, the primary care guys in town, talk to their surgeon friends who are not affiliated with a surgery center and have them invest in the surgery center part.
But do you think that we're limited these days by the fact that like more and more organizations are owning physician practices? Meaning with getting those kinds of deals, why would, for example, a surgeon align with someone who's, let's say, not taking insurance when they have to, when the organization is twisting their arm and making them refer to within network for them?
Well, so a couple of things. Number one, there are still plenty of practices where people don't work for the large organization. Now, the should you align with somebody who's only taking cash, that's a conversation for a whole another day. Yeah, I was going to say, go listen to my podcast. This week's episode is all about should I take insurance and what happens if I only want to take cash, right? And how to figure out whether that's really a viable option in your situation. But to answer your question specifically, the issue here is Number one, the organization cannot make you refer to anybody specifically.
Right.
Okay, that's illegal.
Oh no, that's a given, but we all
Right.
know that
But,
it might be,
but they can lean on you.
right. There's pressure.
Right? But, again, if they don't already have an ambulatory surgery center, for example, there is nothing that precludes the surgeons from investing, unless it says it contractually in their contract, in some other ambulatory surgery center.
Right.
All right. I mean, there are multiple of, and an ambulatory surgery center is only one example of what you can do.
Right.
But to your point, not, yes, there is pressure to sometimes refer within, but I can give you plenty of examples. An example in New York City, an example here in Baton Rouge, where the large organization, they don't have enough capacity to see those patients in a timely fashion, or to get that surgery scheduled in a timely fashion in an ASC,
Right.
or to see that patient in a timely fashion in PT. And so these docs who work for those large organizations are referring them out anyway,
Gotcha.
because it's better patient care.
It's overflow. Yeah, no, of
It's
course.
overflow.
Okay.
You can make a whole business out of overflow.
Right. I think it's just different depending on geographical area. I mean, I'm in the tri-state, like near New York City. And so I think it's a lot harder. And this is why I think there's, for example, not as many DPC practices around here, is because, first of all, there's so much competition from the larger organizations, but there's also very large, like name organizations that, for example, give you amazing care, et cetera. I think geography does factor in.
But this comes back to that whole conversation about what is the opportunity? Where is the opportunity? How, and if you come back to the beginning of what I said, it is understand who the competition in your area is,
Right.
Understand what the need is, how many, if you are a pediatric endocrinologist who treats this one disease, okay, and you're the only person around, then people are going to come from wherever to see
Right.
you, right? On the other hand, if you are the 100th primary care guy in a 10-block radius,
Right.
how are you going to differentiate yourself?
Of course. That's great. So I think that's a good place to end. I think just differentiating yourself is so key. And I think it's more and more sort of presenting itself in the real world, but certainly when you apply online to it, because as physician online brands, we want to differentiate ourselves. But now as practices, it would be fabulous to also differentiate ourselves from the next guy that's available. So I really appreciate this. Sandy, let me just flash where people can find you. Do you have like an easy either handle or web address that I could type out and show here?
Yeah, drsandraweitz.com.
Perfect. And I'll have that in the, is that right, DR, Doctor?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes.
So if you want to see more of Dr. Sandra Weitz or read about her things, then visit her website. And on our website, somidocs.com, you can find this under the series tab, and you can find her links and her bio and everything. Sandy, I'm going to take you off just to let everybody know what's coming from these series. So thank you so much again. Absolutely. I'm going to close by just letting you guys know that there's still more to come. Next week, we have, let me just take out the website. We've got Dr. Kelly Fraden talking about how I self-published a book in under a month, which is going to be fabulous. There's also going to be a lecture on audio the week after because we're taking off next week for elections. If you missed this week's talks, we had Dr. Sarah Mojarad talk, and I'm sorry, she's not a physician, Sarah Mojarad speaking about Twitter on Tuesday night. You could find all of this footage on our website, somidocs.com. We had a physician panel the next day, which is going to be on our website shortly. We also had Dr. Andrew Tissert speaking yesterday live on how to approach starting a side gig. That was very popular. And we've got a lot more coming your way. So including the new Samuel Shem series, the author of The House of God is doing a fabulous series. Some of your colleagues are coming on to talk about how to put the human back into medicine. And we are creating a lot of fabulous things. So come into somedocs.com, subscribe, become a member, and join us in making a positive impact in healthcare. All right, guys. See you later. Have a fabulous weekend. Stay safe on Halloween.